Imagine this, ... It's the year 1541. A Swiss physician, philosopher, an alchemist named Paracelsus lies on his deathbed. His body is broken, his lungs failing, his life slipping away. He whispers his last words, and the people of Salzburg prepare for his burial. But weeks later, rumors begin to spread. People swear they've seen him walking the streets. Some claim he was spotted lecturing in universities. Others whispered that he still roams the forests at night, searching for ingredients for his experiments. Was this just mass hysteria, or had Paracelsus truly discovered the ultimate secret how to cheat death? Today, we're diving into the legend of the cursed alchemist who couldn't die. And trust me, the story of Paracelsus is far stranger than you think. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Hidden Science for more mind-bending stories of forgotten scientists and eerie experiments from history. And let me know in the comments, if immortality was real, would you take it? Chapter 1. The mad healer of the Renaissance. Paracelsus wasn't your average Renaissance doctor. Born as Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, yeah, that's a mouthful, he quickly earned a reputation as both a genius and a madman. He rejected traditional medicine, mocking the ancient teachings of Galen and Avicenna that dominated European universities. Instead, he insisted that medicine should be rooted in chemistry and the natural world. This was radical, even dangerous. For the time, Paracelsus believed every disease had a chemical cause, and therefore, it could be treated with the right chemical remedy. Think about it. In the 1500s, people were still balancing humors and bleeding patients with leeches. Meanwhile, Paracelsus was out here experimenting with mercury, arsenic, and opium. To his critics, he was reckless like a proto-Walter White of medicine. To his followers, he was a visionary. And to the public, he was something more. A man who might have uncovered the secrets of alchemy itself.
Chapter 2. The Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. The world Paracelsus lived in was obsessed with hidden knowledge. Imagine Europe in the early 1500s, kingdoms rising and collapsing, explorers sailing across the globe, and the Catholic Church trying desperately to hold on to spiritual authority as whispers of rebellion. What we now call the Reformation spread like wildfire. In this era of turmoil, there existed another revolution, one quieter, stranger, and infinitely more mysterious. The revolution of alchemy. Alchemy wasn't fake chemistry, at least, not in the way we think of it today. For Renaissance thinkers, alchemy was a blend of science, philosophy, and magic. It was the search for ultimate truths hidden in matter itself, and no truth was more desired than the Philosopher's Stone. The dream of the stone, the Philosopher's Stone, wasn't just a rock. It was an idea, a symbol, a promise. According to alchemists, the stone could do two miraculous things: transmutation of metals, turning worthless metals like lead into gold. This wasn't only about wealth, it was about proving that nature itself could be perfected. If metals could evolve, so could humanity. The elixir of life, a substance so pure, so divine that it could heal every disease, reverse aging, and grant immortality. Imagine the ultimate medicine, a cure for death itself. To an alchemist, these two powers were connected. Gold represented perfection, the most noble of metals. If a substance could transform lead into gold, perhaps it could transform a human into something immortal, something divine. For most alchemists, the stone remained a dream. They locked themselves in smoky laboratories, hunched over furnaces, scribbling cryptic notes that read more like poetry than formulas. They talked about dragons, phoenixes, suns and moons, but rarely produced anything practical. Paracelsus was different. He believed the Philosopher's Stone wasn't just a metaphor. He believed it was real, tangible, attainable, and he was determined to find it. The alchemist, universal solvent. Paracelsus introduced a concept he called the Alchemist. This was his version of the Philosopher's Stone, but with a unique twist. The Alchemist, he claimed, was a universal solvent, a liquid that could dissolve anything, no matter how solid, no matter how resistant. Why did this matter? Because in Paracelsus's mind, if you could break down every substance into its purest essence, you could rebuild it into something better. If you could dissolve metals into their core, you could refine them into gold. If you could dissolve the human body into its essence, you could rebuild it stronger, healthier, even immortal. It sounds bizarre, almost like the plot of Full Metal Alchemist centuries before anime existed. But Paracelsus was dead serious. He wrote that the alchemist was the key to all secrets, the final medicine, the root of all healing. If he could create it, he believed it would open the gates to eternal life. But how would you make such a thing? That's where things take a disturbing turn. The homunculus creating life in a bottle. Paracelsus wasn't content with dissolving and transforming matter. He wanted to create life itself. In his book De Natura Rerum, on the nature of things, he described one of the strangest and most infamous experiments in the history of science, the creation of the homunculus. According to Paracelsus, if you took human sperm, sealed it in a glass vessel, and buried it in horse manure for 40 days, don't ask me, why horse manure? But apparently it provided the perfect head, you would begin to see the formation of a tiny, transparent human. Feed it blood, he claimed, and it would grow into a miniature person, a homunculus. This artificial human could then be raised, taught, and used for magical purposes. Now, whether Paracelsus actually performed these experiments or whether he was writing allegorically is still debated. Some scholars think the homunculus was a metaphor for spiritual transformation, but to his contemporaries it sounded like Frankenstein centuries before Mary Shelley put pen to paper. And here's the disturbing part. Paracelsus didn't talk about the homunculus as a joke. He described it as fact, as if it were another discovery waiting in the shadows. If he believed he could create artificial life in a bottle, was it really so crazy to think he might have tried to extend his own life through chemistry? Poison as medicine. Another clue to Paracelsus' obsession with immortality lies in his radical approach to poisons. In his famous line, he declared, "All things are poison, and nothing is without poison. Only the dose makes a thing not a poison." This was revolutionary. He believed that substances like mercury, arsenic, and opium seen as deadly could actually heal when used in precise amounts. In other words, the very things that killed could also cure. Think about that in the context of immortality. If death itself was a kind of poison, then perhaps the right dose of its antidote could neutralize it, maybe even reverse it. Imagine Paracelsus in his laboratory, testing strange brews of mercury and sulfur, carefully dripping poisons into tinctures, whispering to himself, "One day, this mixture will free me from death." Whispers of success stories began to circulate during Paracelsus's lifetime that he had already succeeded. He traveled constantly, never staying in one city for long, almost as if he were running from something or had all the time in the world. Some claimed he carried a vial of the elixir of life around his neck, sipping it when he felt ill. Others said he could heal himself from wounds no normal man could survive. One tale insists that Paracelsus once drank a lethal dose of mercury in front of his students, only to rise the next morning alive, smiling, and perfectly healthy. Whether this was alchemy, clever trickery, or pure exaggeration, it fed the growing belief that he was more than human. Between science and sorcery, this is where Paracelsus becomes so fascinating and so dangerous. To the scholars of his day, he blurred the line between physician and sorcerer. Was he healing patients with radical new methods? Or was he playing God, dabbling in powers beyond human comprehension? When he spoke of the Philosopher's Stone, he didn't frame it as a mystical dream, he framed it as a scientific goal. In a way, Paracelsus was one of the first to look at immortality not as divine magic, but as something you could achieve in a laboratory. It's no wonder his peers both feared and hated him. Imagine being a university professor in 1520, teaching the safe old doctrines of Galen, and here comes this cocky Swiss alchemist claiming he can make artificial humans, cure death, and dissolve the universe into its essence. To many he was either a fraud, a lunatic, or the devil himself. And yet, his charisma, his writings, and his sheer defiance gave him a cult-like following. To his supporters, he wasn't just a doctor, he was a prophet of a new age of science. The dangerous obsession, but obsession has a cost. Paracelsus spent his life chasing the dream of immortality, the Philosopher's Stone, the Alchemist. He was constantly on the move, constantly experimenting, constantly at odds with the world. And here's the chilling thought. What if he found it? What if, in some dark corner of his laboratory, he mixed the right ingredients, whispered the right incantation, and sipped the elixir? If he did, it would explain everything that came after his strange death. The sightings, the whispers that he still walked among the living, because in the legend of Paracelsus, immortality wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. Chapter 3. A life surrounded by death. Paracelsus's obsession with immortality wasn't born in a vacuum. It came from a lifetime of staring death in the face. Europe in the 16th century was a brutal place. The average lifespan hovered around 35 years. War, famine, and plague stalked every village. A simple infection could kill you in days. Physicians had little more than superstition and prayer to offer. In this grim reality, medicine wasn't just a profession, it was a gamble with death itself. And Paracelsus, he walked right into the fire. The battlefield doctor from a young age, Paracelsus wandered across Europe. He never stayed still, moving from town to town, studying, experimenting, and often clashing with authorities. One of his most notorious habits was to travel with mercenary armies, tending to soldiers on bloody battlefields. Picture the scene: tents filled with groaning men, the stench of infection thick in the air, surgeons sawing off limbs without anesthesia. Most doctors kept their distance, writing about medicine in clean university halls. But not Paracelsus. He went straight to the mud and blood. Here, surrounded by carnage, he experimented. He tested new mixtures of mercury, sulfur, and opium. He washed wounds with chemical solutions instead of wine or herbs. And in many cases, his patients survived when others would have died. but his methods were so unorthodox that other physicians called him reckless, even murderous. To them he was gambling with human lives. To Paracelsus he was pushing back the walls of death, the plague and the poisoner. When plagues swept through Europe, most fled. Paracelsus went in. He believed the plague was not a curse from God, as many claimed, but a kind of poison, something that could be neutralized if you found the right antidote. He experimented with arsenic, lead, and even deadly nightshade. The idea was simple but terrifying. If a poison causes illness, perhaps another poison, in the right dose, could cancel it out. It was a dangerous gamble, and not everyone survived his treatments. Whispers grew that Paracelsus was less a healer and more a poisoner. Some accused him of killing patients deliberately, using them as human test subjects in his quest for knowledge. Yet even his critics admitted he cured some cases no one else could. The line between doctor and executioner blurred. Was he saving lives, or was he simply experimenting until he stumbled across something that worked? The death that followed him everywhere Paracelsus went, death seemed to follow. Inns he stayed in reported mysterious illnesses breaking out soon after. Students who studied under him sometimes died suddenly. There are accounts, half rumor, half history, that people feared inviting him into their towns, worried he would bring plague with him like a cursed wanderer. But paradoxically, the same towns would call on him when death did arrive, because no one else had the courage or the madness to face it. This duality gave Paracelsus a kind of dark charisma. He was both feared and revered, shunned and sought out. It's easy to see why people began to whisper that he was more than mortal, that perhaps death couldn't claim him because he had made a pact with it. Death, as teacher Paracelsus himself, never denied the shadow he carried. In his writings he often described death not as an enemy, but as a teacher. He believed that by understanding poison, decay and disease, one could learn the secrets of life itself. He once wrote that the physician must walk with death as a companion, not as a foe. To him, death was part of the natural process, something that could be studied, even manipulated. This attitude scandalized his peers. In a time when medicine was supposed to glorify God and preserve the soul, Paracelsus treated death as a chemical puzzle to be solved. It was cold, unsettling, and yet, ahead of its time, the soul and the body. But there was another, more mystical layer to his work. Paracelsus believed that the body wasn't just flesh and blood. It was infused with a spiritual essence he called the archeus. This archeus, he claimed, was like a vital flame inside each person, connecting the physical body to the cosmic order. When a person grew sick, it wasn't just a chemical imbalance. Their archeus had been disturbed. The physician's job was to realign it, to restore harmony between the body and the cosmos. This philosophy blurred into the occult. Critics accused him of necromancy, of summoning spirits to heal or harm. Others claimed he performed rituals late at night, muttering over flasks of glowing liquids as if bargaining with unseen forces. If you saw him through the eyes of a frightened villager, hunched over strange instruments, bottles of mercury and arsenic at his side, muttering prayers to planets and stars, would you believe he was a doctor? Or would you believe he was a sorcerer in league with death itself? The weight of obsession, one thing is certain. Paracelsus was consumed by his work. He rarely settled, rarely rested, rarely lived like an ordinary man. He chased disease into plague houses, drank poisons in the name of research, and pushed himself to the edge of sanity in pursuit of the ultimate cure. And here's where the story takes on its haunting edge. What if his obsession wasn't just about curing others? What if, deep down, he was testing poisons and antidotes not to heal but to discover the formula that would free him from death entirely? In chasing the secrets of life, he immersed himself in death. Every experiment was a wager. Would this brew kill him, or would it make him stronger? Some accounts suggest he was seen staggering out of laboratories, sickly pale, only to return days later with renewed vigor, as if he had died and risen again. This is why Paracelsus's legend endures. He wasn't a man who avoided death. He invited it, wrestled with it, experimented with it, and, according to some, outwitted it, foreshadowing the curse. By the time he reached his mid-40s, Paracelsus looked decades older. His hair had thinned, his body bore the scars of illness, and yet his energy was unbroken. To those who followed him, this was proof of his dangerous knowledge. It was said that death could never quite take him, that every time it tried he slipped away, reborn through some secret potion or ritual. And when he finally did collapse in Salzburg at age 47, few believed it was the end. Because for a man who had walked hand in hand with death his entire life, dying seemed almost impossible. Chapter 4. The death of Paracelsus, or was it? By the late summer of 1541, Paracelsus was exhausted. His hair was thin, his face gaunt, and his body wrecked from decades of ingesting poisons in the name of science. He had been called a prophet, a madman, a healer, and a sorcerer. But at just 47 years old, the alchemist who claimed to chase immortality suddenly found himself on the edge of death. Or so the story goes. The official version, the official record, is simple enough. On September 24, 1541, Paracelsus died in the city of Salzburg, Austria. He was buried quietly in a grave outside the walls of St. Sebastian's Church. He had no fortune, no wife, no children. just a few devoted students, a collection of cryptic writings, and a reputation that was equal parts brilliance and infamy. His death certificate, such as it was, gave no extraordinary details. Some accounts say he died from natural causes, his health ruined by years of reckless experimentation with mercury and arsenic. Others claim he succumbed to some lingering illness, perhaps tuberculosis or cirrhosis, but almost immediately, whispers began. Because nothing about Paracelsus's life was ever simple. The assassination theory, one of the first rumors to spread, was that Paracelsus had not died naturally at all. According to this theory, he was murdered pushed down a flight of stairs in an inn by hired assassins. Why? Because Paracelsus had made powerful enemies. For years, he had openly insulted the medical establishment. He called traditional doctors barbers and butchers, mocking their reliance on bleeding and astrology. He burned the ancient writings of Galen in public, declaring them obsolete. In the process, he humiliated the wealthy and well-connected physicians who controlled Europe's universities. It is said that some of these doctors, furious at his arrogance and fearful of his growing influence, paid mercenaries to silence him once and for all. The story goes that Paracelsus was shoved violently down a staircase in Salzburg, suffering fatal injuries to his skull. This version of events spread quickly among his followers, who saw it not as a tragedy but as proof. The establishment had to kill him because his discoveries were too dangerous to be allowed to live. The poisoned healer, another darker rumor, claims he was poisoned, ironically killed by the very substances he had experimented with his entire life. Some whispered that jealous rivals slipped mercury into his drink, knowing it was his signature chemical. Others claimed that his own experiments finally caught up with him, that he had ingested one dose too many of his lethal medicines. If this is true, then his death was a cruel irony. The man who believed poisons could be the key to immortality may have accidentally dosed himself into an early grave. The rumors of survival, but here is where the story takes its strangest turn. Because only weeks after his burial, people began reporting something impossible. Sightings of Paracelsus alive and well. Letters circulated claiming he had been seen walking the streets of Basel, lecturing in taverns in Prague, and even traveling in France. Some claimed he had returned to his homeland in Switzerland, carrying on his work as if nothing had happened. To those who believed in his alchemical powers, this was the only explanation. Paracelsus had finally succeeded in creating his elixir of life. He had faked his death, or perhaps he had died and resurrected himself through his secret potion. A wanderer without a grave. The sightings continued for decades. In some versions, Paracelsus was said to appear suddenly in a town, cloaked and mysterious, offering cryptic advice before vanishing again. In others, he was a spectral figure seen at night, wandering forests or graveyards as if searching for ingredients for his experiments. One particularly eerie account claimed that a university in Prague received a letter supposedly penned by Paracelsus years after his death, filled with obscure alchemical instructions. Was it a forgery, or had the immortal alchemist continued his work in the shadows? To his followers, this only confirmed what they had suspected. Death could not hold him. He was cursed or blessed to wander the earth forever. A body that wouldn't rest even his burial site became a source of legend. His grave in Salzburg was disturbed multiple times over the centuries. In one exhumation, stories spread that his body had not decayed as expected, fueling the myth that he was preserved by unnatural means. Later examinations showed injuries to his skull, lending credibility to the assassination theory. But the lack of decay continued to haunt the legend. Had Paracelsus's own potions kept him intact, even in death? Between history and folklore, historians today argued that these posthumous sightings were likely exaggerations or cases of mistaken identity. Paracelsus was a common-looking man, short, stocky, bald, with a plain face. It would have been easy to mistake another wandering scholar for him. But here's the problem. The sheer number of these stories makes them hard to dismiss. From Switzerland to Bohemia to France, the legend of the undying alchemist spread like wildfire. It wasn't just wishful thinking. Too many had felt real, too real. The immortal curse. What makes the story so haunting is that immortality in Paracelsus's case was never described as a blessing. The rumors painted him as a restless soul, unable to stay in one place, unable to die, doomed to roam the earth forever in search of knowledge. It echoes the medieval myth of the wandering Jew, a man cursed to walk the world until the end of time for mocking Christ. Paracelsus's legend became a new version of that story, except instead of a curse from God, his doom came from his own obsession with alchemy. If true, then his immortality wasn't triumph, it was punishment. The man who couldn't die. So what really happened in Salzburg in 1541? Was Paracelsus assassinated by rivals, poisoned by his own medicines, or did he fake his death entirely? We may never know. What we do know is this: his death only amplified his legend. The man who had courted death his entire life, who had experimented with poisons and elixirs, who had sought the philosopher's stone, he could not simply fade quietly into history. Instead, he became what he had always wanted to be: immortal, if not in body, then in story, if not in flesh, then in myth. And for many, that's far more terrifying. Chapter 5. The Ghost of the Alchemist. When most men die, their memory fades, their friends mourn, their enemies move on, and their names are eventually reduced to lines in dusty books. But Paracelsus was not most men. 4 years after his supposed death in Salzburg in 1541, whispers of him refused to fade. In fact, they grew louder. He became less a man and more a presence of phantom who seemed to appear wherever fear, sickness or mystery lingered. It was as if Paracelsus himself had become a ghost. The first sightings, the earliest reports, came only weeks after his burial. A merchant in Basel swore he had seen Paracelsus walking the marketplace, who'd pulled low eyes scanning the apothecary's stalls. He was certain, he said, because he had once been treated by the physician himself. Not long after, a group of students in Prague claimed a mysterious lecturer had appeared in a tavern, speaking passionately about alchemy and medicine. His words, they said, matched Paracelsus's writings exactly. Some swore it was him alive disguised, testing his students even beyond the grave. Soon, the sightings spread like wildfire. Inns, universities, roadside taverns, even noble courts all reported visitations. The man was supposed to be buried, but he kept showing up, always just out of reach, always cloaked in mystery. The wanderer legend from these stories grew a legend. Paracelsus had become an immortal wanderer, doomed to walk the world without rest. Some saw him as cursed, punished for his arrogance in challenging death. He was compared to the myth of the wandering Jew, a man who mocked Christ and was condemned to live until Judgment Day. But in this version, Paracelsus was cursed not by God, but by his own hand, by the very potions and experiments he had spent his life perfecting. Others painted him as a hidden master. In occult circles, he was revered as one of the immortals, secret figures who lived outside the bounds of time, guiding human knowledge from the shadows. Alongside Hermes Trismegistus, the mysterious Comte de Saint-Germain, and other rumored deathless figures, Paracelsus was said to be part of a brotherhood of eternal alchemists. To believers, he wasn't a ghost. He was a teacher, appearing in times of crisis to offer fragments of forbidden knowledge before vanishing again. Hauntings of the written word. Even Paracelsus's books gained a reputation for being haunted. He left behind over 400 manuscripts, many of which were filled with bizarre, cryptic instructions. They blended medicine, alchemy, mysticism, and astrology into tangled passages that read more like coded grimoires than textbooks. Readers across Europe described strange experiences with these works. Some claimed they felt as though Paracelsus was speaking directly to them, whispering from the page. Others reported hearing voices at night after studying his writings, or experiencing vivid dreams in which Paracelsus himself appeared, guiding their hand in experiments. One particularly eerie rumor held that if you read his work, De Vita Longa on Long Life Aloud, Paracelsus's spirit would be summoned into the room, listening, judging, perhaps even offering answers. Whether these were hallucinations, paranoia, or genuine supernatural encounters didn't matter. The legend spread Paracelsus had bound part of his soul into his writings, ensuring that he would never truly leave. The alchemist's restless spirit. By the 17th century, stories of Paracelsus's ghosts were everywhere. Soldiers claimed to see him walking silently across battlefields at night, inspecting the dead and wounded. Physicians whispered that his ghost stood behind them as they worked, cold hands guiding or condemning their choices. One chilling tale from Switzerland describes a farmer who found a cloaked man standing at the edge of his field at dusk. When he approached, the figure turned, and the farmer recognized the bald, heavy-browed face of Paracelsus. The figure pointed toward the soil, muttered something about hidden minerals, and vanished into the mist. The farmer dug where the ghost had pointed. According to the legend, he struck a vein of silver. Encounters like this turned Paracelsus into a folkloric specter, half terrifying, half helpful, always unsettling. Occultists and secret societies. The rise of secret societies in the 1600s and 1700s gave Paracelsus's ghost new life. The Rosicrucians, an esoteric brotherhood obsessed with hidden wisdom, claimed Paracelsus as one of their spiritual masters. To them, he had not died at all. He had simply withdrawn from the world, waiting for humanity to be ready for his teachings. Freemasons and other mystical groups likewise revered him, citing his supposed ghostly appearances as proof that he remained active, guiding chosen disciples. In this way, Paracelsus became less a man and more an archetype, the eternal alchemist, the restless spirit, the physician who refused to surrender to death. The curse of immortality. But here's the dark twist. In many versions of the legend, Paracelsus's ghost is not triumphant, it is tormented. He is not a sage wandering freely, but a prisoner of his own obsession. His search for immortality worked, but imperfectly. Instead of granting eternal youth, it left him a shadow, condemned to walk without rest, never finding peace. It's a chilling irony. The very thing he sought, life beyond death, may have become his eternal punishment. This interpretation resonated deeply with people of the time, because it reflected a moral lesson. Meddle too far with the secrets of God, and you will pay the price. A ghost who still walks. Even today, some occult enthusiasts believe Paracelsus still walks among us. In certain esoteric traditions, he is invoked during rituals, called upon for healing, or imagined as a spectral advisor in the practice of alchemy. Modern paranormal researchers sometimes list him among immortal figures like Saint Germain, said to appear mysteriously throughout history under different names. And in Salzburg, where his grave lies, visitors claim to feel an oppressive presence, some report seeing a shadowy figure near his tomb. Others say the air grows heavy as if watched by unseen eyes. Whether ghost or legend, Paracelsus refuses to stay buried between ghost story and legacy. What makes this chapter of his story so compelling is that it reflects the dual nature of Paracelsus himself. To the rational mind, the sightings are exaggerations, folklore, or tricks of memory. But to those who lived in the 16th and 17th centuries, people surrounded daily by plague, war, and death-soaked stories were entirely believable. And perhaps, at some level, they were true. Because Paracelsus did achieve a form of immortality. He became not just a man, but a myth, a ghostly presence that still lingers centuries later. His body may have crumbled, but his name, his books, and his legend, they never died. The ghost that wouldn't die. So was Paracelsus truly a ghost, or was he something strange, a man whose ideas were so radical, so disturbing, that they could not be buried with him? One thing is clear, when people spoke of him walking after death, they weren't just describing a haunting, they were describing the very essence of his legacy, a restless spirit that refuses to fade. An eternal experimenter still searching for the secret of life. And maybe that's the true curse of Paracelsus, to live forever. Not as flesh, but as a story that refuses to die.
Chapter 6. Between Science and the Occult. If you've been following this story, you might already feel the tension at the heart of Paracelsus's life. Was he a pioneering physician ahead of his time, or a sorcerer dabbling in forbidden arts? The truth is, he was both. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous, so fascinating, and so unforgettable. Medicine meets magic! In the 16th century, there was no clear separation between science and the occult. Medicine, astrology, alchemy, and religion all swirled together into a messy soup of knowledge. But even in that strange world, Paracelsus stood out, where most doctors clung to the teachings of Galen and Hippocrates' ideas that had been recycled. For over 1,000 years, Paracelsus rejected them outright. He burned medical textbooks in public, declaring that true healing was not in libraries, but in nature itself. This was radical. To him, every herb, every stone, every element carried not just physical properties, but spiritual energies. Healing wasn't just about balancing humors in the body, it was about aligning yourself with the hidden forces of the universe. That meant medicine was inseparable from magic. The doctrine of signatures. One of his strangest yet most influential ideas was what's called the doctrine of signatures. According to this belief, God had signed every plant and mineral with clues about its purpose. Walnuts, which looked like little brains, were said to cure mental disorders. Red plants were thought to help blood ailments. Flowers, shaped like eyes, were supposed to heal vision problems. It sounds ridiculous today, but at the time, it was a revolutionary way of looking at the world. Nature wasn't random. It was a divine code waiting to be decided. This doctrine made Paracelsus both a scientist and a mystic. He studied plants empirically, experimenting with their effects, but he also read them like symbols in a holy text.
Alchemy for healing, not just gold. Most alchemists of his day were obsessed with turning lead into gold. Paracelsus, however, reimagined alchemy as something bigger. For him, alchemy was the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Instead of focusing on riches, he sought to extract the essence of substances, the hidden power that could heal or transform the human body. This is where he developed powerful tinctures, distillations, and chemical medicines that actually worked better than many traditional remedies. For example, he introduced compounds containing mercury, sulfur, and other minerals into medicine, a dangerous step, but one that hinted at the rise of modern pharmacology. Of course, this came with risk. His experiments blurred into poison-making, and sometimes his cures killed as often as they saved. But the principle that chemistry could become medicine was groundbreaking. Astrology and the body. Paracelsus also believed the stars ruled over human health. He wasn't alone, and this astrology was widely respected at the time, but he took it further. To him, every organ corresponded to a planet. The heart was tied to the sun, the brain to the moon, the liver to Jupiter, and so on. Illness, then, wasn't just biological, it was cosmic. To heal someone, you had to understand not only their body, but their astrological chart, their relationship to the heavens themselves. This made his medicine mystical, but it also made him wildly popular with patients who felt traditional doctors ignored the spiritual side of life. Accusations of sorcery. Of course, not everyone was impressed. Many of his contemporaries saw him as reckless, arrogant, even dangerous. His use of minerals and poisons earned him the nickname the Poison Doctor. His blending of medicine with astrology and alchemy made him look like a sorcerer. Some whispered that he summoned spirits during his experiments, that he could command elemental beings, or that he had pacts with demons. Whether or not those stories were true, they reveal how unsettling Paracelsus appeared to others. He wasn't just a doctor, he was a liminal figure, straddling the line between natural science and supernatural heresy. The double legacy, here's what makes Paracelsus so haunting. His work gave birth to both modern medicine and occult mysticism. On one hand, his insistence on observation, experimentation, and chemical remedies pushed medicine closer to science as we know it today. He's often called the father of toxicology because he was one of the first to understand that the dose makes the poison. On the other hand, his belief in magical correspondences, spirits, and astrological healing fueled centuries of mystical traditions. Even now, you'll find Paracelsus quoted in New Age writings, magical grimoires, and occult manifestos. He was both healer and magician, scientist and sorcerer, a man between two worlds. In the end, Paracelsus lived his life in a twilight space between science and the occult, a space that frightened his peers and fascinated his followers, and maybe that's why his legend refuses to die, because he represents something we still struggle with today, the blurry boundary between knowledge and mystery, between fact and faith. To call him simply a doctor is to miss his magic. To call him simply a magician is to ignore his science. He was both, and that paradox is what keeps his ghost alive. Centuries later. Chapter 7. The immortality myth. Paracelsus's death in 1541 should have been the end of his story. By all accounts, he was buried in Salzburg, Austria, in the cemetery of St. Sebastian's Church. A tombstone marks the spot to this day. But the strange thing about Paracelsus is this: the man refused to stay dead. The whispers after death, almost immediately after his supposed passing, rumors began to spread. Some said his death had been staged, others insisted that his body had never actually been in the coffin, and soon enough the stories grew stranger. People began claiming they had seen him Malevius even decades after 1541. To his critics this was nonsense. But to his followers, it was proof that he had achieved what every alchemist dreamed of: the Philosopher's Stone, the elixir of eternal life. The Philosopher's Stone and eternal life. For centuries, alchemists had chased a double prize. The first was obvious, turning base metals like lead into pure gold. But the second, and far more important, was immortality. The Philosopher's Stone wasn't just a magical rock. It was thought to produce the elixir of life, a liquid that could cure all diseases, heal wounds, and grant eternal youth. Whoever mastered it would never fear death again, and Paracelsus, more than anyone else, obsessed over this. His writings overflow with references to secret elixirs, hidden essences, and the transmutation of life itself. He wasn't content with healing people temporarily, he wanted to conquer mortality itself. So when stories emerged that he had been seen long after his death, people connected the dots. Maybe Paracelsus had succeeded. Maybe he was walking the world forever, hidden in plain sight. Sightings across Europe. There are accounts, scattered and fragmented, of Paracelsus being spotted across Europe in the decades after his death. One story tells of him appearing in Basel, Switzerland, giving a lecture on medicine to astonished students. Another claims he was seen in Cologne, wandering the marketplace with the same fiery energy he'd had in life. Even stranger, there are tales of Paracelsus showing up centuries later, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in physical form, offering wisdom to later alchemists. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Paracelsus had become a sort of wandering immortal, a ghostly teacher who could not be contained by time. To some, he was a saint of alchemy. To others, a cursed soul doomed to wander until the end of days. Was it just myth-making? Of course, we have to ask, were these sightings real? It's very likely that many were just legends, spread by his devoted followers to keep his ideas alive. After all, alchemists often cloaked their teachings in myth, allegory, and mystery. By saying Paracelsus still walks among us, his disciples could claim a kind of divine authority for his work. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike most alchemists, Paracelsus's name kept appearing in strange, unexpected places. In secret manuscripts, in grimoires, in whispers among Rosicrucians and Freemasons. He wasn't just remembered, he was believed to be present. This wasn't common for scientists of his time. Galileo didn't have ghost sightings, Copernicus didn't reappear in marketplaces. But Paracelsus, his legend, refused to die. The curse of immortality. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because if Paracelsus really had achieved immortality, would it be a blessing or a curse? Many myths paint him as a restless soul, wandering endlessly, unable to find peace. His pursuit of eternal life might have backfired, condemning him to a half-existence, not truly alive, not truly dead. This idea taps into a universal fear. What if eternal life isn't paradise, but torment? Imagine centuries of loneliness, of watching the world change while you remain trapped, carrying secrets too heavy for mortal minds. Paracelsus's legend becomes a warning. To tamper with death is to risk becoming deathless in the worst possible way. Pop culture echoes. It's no coincidence that Paracelsus inspired later works of fiction. His name appears in occult texts, in magical traditions, even in modern fantasy novels and games. He's often portrayed as the archetype of the mad immortal alchemist, a man who wanted too much, and may have paid the price for it. Think of characters like Nicholas Flamel in Harry Potter, or even Dr. Faustus, who bargains for forbidden knowledge. They all owe something to Paracelsus, the real man whose legend blurred into myth, between belief and mystery. So did Paracelsus really crack the code of immortality? Probably not in the literal sense. But the persistence of his legend tells us something important. People wanted to believe it. They wanted to believe that a man could defy death, that knowledge could transcend the grave, that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for eternal life through alchemy, science, or magic. Paracelsus became that hope. He became the myth of immortality itself, the living legend, and so, centuries later, we're still talking about him. His grave in Salzburg may hold his bones, or it may just be an empty shell. His books may be studied as quaint relics, or as coded maps to something greater. But the real immortality of Paracelsus isn't found in an elixir or a stone. It's in the fact that his name, his image, his ghost continues to walk among us even now. Maybe that's the secret he discovered. Not endless life in the flesh, but endless life in legend. Chapter 8. Legacy of accursed alchemist. Paracelsus has been dead for nearly 5 centuries. And yet, the shadow of the man still looms large over medicine, science, and even the occult. His grave sits quietly in Salzburg, but his name refuses to stay buried. The question is, what legacy did he truly leave behind? Was he a genius far ahead of his time, a charlatan who cloaked failure in mystery, or something else entirely, something cursed? The father of toxicology. Let's start with what history can prove. Paracelsus revolutionized medicine in ways that are still felt today. He introduced the idea that the dose makes the poison. This simple phrase that even water can kill in excess, and even poison can heal in small amounts, remains a foundation of modern pharmacology. Every prescription, every chemical study of toxicity, owes something to Paracelsus. He challenged the medical orthodoxy of his day, refusing to rely on medieval textbooks, and instead insisting on direct observation, experimentation, and practical treatment. This made him a hero to some, a heretic to others. So in one sense, his legacy is clear. He helped drag medicine out of superstition and into a new scientific era. The alchemist who walked with ghosts. But there's another legacy, one that isn't written in the textbooks. Paracelsus's name became synonymous with the strange borderland between science and the supernatural. He didn't reject magic, he embraced it. He wrote of spirits, of astral forces, of invisible energies that shaped human life. He blurred the line between physician and sorcerer, between healer and alchemist. For centuries after his death, occultists treated him like a saint. His writings were copied into grimoires. His name was invoked in rituals. His ghostly appearances were seen as signs that he was still guiding humanity from beyond the grave. This is the darker part of his legacy. The idea that true knowledge might come at a terrible price, and that even the most brilliant discoveries can be cursed. A divided reputation. What's fascinating is how split Paracelsus's reputation became. To doctors and scientists, he was the father of chemistry and medicine. To alchemists and mystics, he was the patron of esoteric wisdom. To his enemies, he was a fraud, a drunk, even a madman. And this division never really went away. Today, you'll find Paracelsus mentioned in academic textbooks and occult forums, in scholarly biographies and fantasy novels. He's everywhere, and he means something different to everyone. That, perhaps, is his truest legacy. He's impossible to pin down. He belongs to no single field, no single story. The curse of immortality revisited. But let's return to the myth, because no matter how much we analyze his real contributions, the legend of Paracelsus's immortality lingers. Did he succeed in creating the elixir of life? Did he fake his death? Did he really appear centuries later, wandering marketplaces and teaching hidden disciples? We may never know. But in a strange way, the immortality myth came true not in his body, but in his memory. He achieved a form of eternal life not through alchemy, but through story. Every time someone whispers about the Philosopher's Stone, every time a novel or movie depicts the immortal alchemist, every time his strange writings are dug up and reread, Paracelsus lives again. And perhaps that's the curse. To never rest, to walk forever as a ghost of knowledge, half scientist, half sorcerer. Pop culture resurrection. If you look closely, Paracelsus keeps popping up in modern culture. He appears as a character in novels, video games, even role-playing lore. His name surfaces in Harry Potter, Dr. Faustus, and dozens of esoteric references. In many of these depictions, he isn't just a historical figure, he's a symbol of forbidden knowledge, of the alchemist who went too far. And maybe that's fitting. After all, his own life blurred reality and myth so deeply that he almost seems fictional himself. The eternal question. So what do we make of Paracelsus? Was he a cursed alchemist forever bound to legends of immortality? Was he a revolutionary scientist whose eccentricities made him larger than life? Or was he both at once, a man caught between reason and magic, doomed to never be understood completely? Perhaps that's why his story endures. Because Paracelsus isn't just a man from the past, he's a mirror of our own obsessions. We, too, want to conquer death. We, too, chase miracles through science and technology, whether it's gene editing, artificial intelligence, or dreams of uploading consciousness. In a way, we are all chasing the Philosopher's Stone, just with different tools. And Paracelsus stands as both an inspiration and a warning. Brilliance can transform the world, but ambition can also blur into madness. In the end, Paracelsus's legacy is this: he never died, not in the way most people do. His name, his ideas, his myths still haunt us, like the flicker of an eternal flame that refuses to go out. And maybe that's the true secret of immortality, not a potion or a stone, but a story powerful enough to outlive the body. So when you hear the name Paracelsus, remember, you're not just hearing about a man who lived 500 years ago. You're hearing the echo of a curse, a legend, and a dream humanity still hasn't let go of. The cursed alchemist who couldn't die might still be with us. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Paracelsus discovered immortality, or was he just a brilliant scientist wrapped in legend? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'll be reading them. If you enjoyed this dive into hidden science and cursed history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. And if you want to go deeper, check out our next episode on the mad botanist who tried to create human plants. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, and beware of alchemists promising eternal life.